my definition of the Cold War would be a political standoff between the world's major superpowers, characterized by an arms buildup on both sides, and an escalating arms buildup on both sides.
That's how I remember. Cuban Missile Crisis probably was the first one that really rang my bell as a young child. Was the potential for war right there with Kennedy as president.
At a very, very young age, I was afraid of the Russians bombing the United States. The domino theory. I mean, the domino theory.
Well, out in the world.
Yeah, but that it probably would eventually come here if they were allowed to gain power, more and more power.
Grew up being taught, I think, more clearly about the advantages of our system. I think nowadays, it seems like very open, you know, you're okay, I'm okay, you're okay, as far as looking at other forms of government. That we were the head of the free world, we were going to stand up, we were going to be the ones leading this.
And we would preserve freedom
And
for as many people in the world as we could.
This government will do everything it possibly can, and I think it can meet its responsibilities to make sure that there are no Americans involved in any actions inside Cuba.
The Cuban Missile Crisis is the only time I've ever seen my father cry, or up to that point, it was the only time I'd ever seen my father cry. He had served in World War II and he'd been badly injured, and he was afraid for his life many times, and he was afraid he was going to have to go back to war. He was afraid he was young enough to be drafted again or sent back, and it reduced him to just a level of despair that I've never seen before or since.
This man, like thousands of others around the country, is suffering from a dread disease called nuclearosis. The symptoms? Nuclear blindness. All he can see is a mushroom cloud. He is blinded from the fear of it, deaf from the sound of it. There is a short circuit in his brain. He can only think of the awfulness of the nuclear bomb. A fallout shelter in your basement will give adequate shielding from radioactive fallout. He's finally getting the message. Are you?
People did build bomb shelters, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were plenty of people who had bomb shelters in their backyards. You know, they
Yeah,
would dig down under the earth.
But there were people, I know we had in our neighborhood, we had one.
I guess some people were comforted by the thought that they could get in them in case of a nuclear attack.
Duck and cover.
But now those drills weren't what we were going to do if a bomb was dropped on us. The drills were, it was duck and cover, what to do if there was a nuclear attack. Oh boy. The idea was that we were all going to get under our desks, and then it was basically the same drill we had if there was going to be an earthquake.
He knew just what to do. He's duck and cover. Duck and cover.
When I was little, in the 50s, I'd be playing outside with my cousins, and a plane would go over, and I would take cover. I was worried about that. And how that information seeped into my life, I couldn't even tell you. I can tell you that in 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell, that was a great day. That was an amazing event, and I watched it on television, but people who knew that it was going to happen, people from England, flew there to be there for that momentous occasion. It was a huge symbolic event, and the end of the Cold War is significant, I think, especially to people your age, because I can remember a time when Russia was the enemy, the Soviet Union was the enemy, and that's no longer true. It just doesn't exist as an enemy.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
While perusing the memories of the older generation, we were reminded that the perception of history is viewed through the lens of personal experience. While speaking to those who grew up in the United States, we found that their views were extremely different from she who grew up in Nazi-occupied Europe. For one, the Cold War was a period of acute fear. For the other was nothing compared to her daily struggles and the memories of World War II.
The public's level of awareness in the United States during the Cold War was highly underdeveloped. The information shared by the government severely underplayed the danger that U.S. citizens would have been exposed to should there have been an atomic attack. This was either an attempt to maintain the peace, or it was that the government were themselves uninformed as to the effects of nuclear radiation.
However, the public's distrust of communism and their belief in America was unanimous. No matter what their background was, the people we interviewed agreed that the U.S. was the only world power with the strength to combat communism. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 was a great occasion celebrated throughout the world. This event signified the end of the communist reign in Europe.
The circumstances that have shaped a person will affect their perspective. Caroline and Charles, who grew up distanced from the memories of World War II, were profoundly affected by their experiences during the Cold War period. Elsa grew up in the midst of the terror of World War II and entered the United States as an immigrant in the late 50s. The fear brought on by the possibility of a nuclear attack was minimized by the experiences of her youth. Although they all lived extraordinarily different lives, the threat of communism seeped into the minds of all those living in the Western world. In the words of Elsa Wolf, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, "We were all just partying over that."